UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Well, welcome everybody to UAP Crossfire, the show where we have four alpha males trying to find out the biggest secret in the universe. Are we alone? And I'm going to introduce everybody because we got a special guest tonight, and we're going to get to that in just a few minutes. But first, right next to me, I don't know if it's this, yeah, that way, is my good friend Dan Carlson, also known as the Padre. Hello, Padre. How are you tonight?
I'm well. It's a beautiful evening here in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Spring is in the air, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion tonight.
Awesome. Hey, and I want to welcome back Commander Cobra, who's been on a leave of absence in Saudi Arabia and some other places. And welcome back, Commander. Long time, huh?
Thank you very much. It's back. I was actually back last week, but you weren't with us.
I know. I apologize.
So
my
this
wife
is great
had made
that the Fab Four can get back together again, for a quick join up. I'll be traveling again next week, but I hope to make the show. I think I'm going to figure out a way to make the show.
Awesome.
But I can't say much about that. And the weather here is pretty interesting. We have a nor'easter passing through the lower part of New England, which means it's a low pressure system that's gone offshore, and we're going to get the unusual northeast wind. That's nor'easter comes from because of the counterclockwise flow of a low system, and it's pounding New England with rain. 2 inches to 3 inches of rain has hit the lower part of New England with localized flooding.
We've had rain all day today, so we're getting probably the tip of that right about now because it is going crazy outside. Winds up there, rain's up there. And, of course, the show wouldn't be the show without the silverback of ufology himself, the man with the golden tongue. I love him. Don Eckert. Hello, Don. How are you?
Doing okay, Chris. Out here in sunny Southern California, and the last several days it's lived up to its name, and all over our area, okay, where I live in a canyon, we have been placed on notice for rattlesnakes. They're everywhere.
Notice for
rattlesnakes. Oh my God, yeah.
What are they come down a whole herd of rattlesnakes like they migrate or what? I mean, how do you go out? Is that like an early warning system that comes on your television?
Where I live, there was a snake crossing here.
Right.
In the canyon. I personally have exterminated 7 right here at the house. Okay. I had one, and boy, I'll tell you, this was a scary one. One August night, it was the year that we landed it was the night and the year we landed the rover on Mars. I was out on the patio with at that time, my little Cocker Spaniel, Jade. And when I came in, she made a beeline through the dining room to the front door, and suddenly she came out 3 times faster, running around the side of the house, going in the side bedroom, and Vicky started yelling at me. Well, it turned out we had a rattlesnake come under the screen door. It was a juvenile, about maybe 14, 15 inches in length, but it struck her. It bit her. And boy, I'll tell you what, we almost lost her. She was in the hospital for 3 days. They even had to put her on oxygen. So when they tell me snakes are around here, pal, I keep my eyes open.
All right.
So, Skywatcher, I just sent you a quick picture to help with Don's
Is that for a rattlesnake warning?
I just sent it to you in the email there, Skywatcher. So if you get a chance, you can throw it up there while we're working to the our guest who is waiting to jump with us.
Well, yeah, I just want to say, people in California, beware of the rattlesnake warning. So let's get to our guest. Our guest tonight is Nick Pope. Nick worked as a civil servant for the Ministry of Defense from 1985 to 2006, and from 1991 to 1994, he worked as the Secretariat Air Staff, more commonly known as the UFO desk, where his duties include investigating reports of UFO sightings to see if they had anything to do with defense significance. At that time, while the Ministry of Defense stated that it remained totally open-minded about the existence of otherwise of extraterrestrial life forms, it also stated that there was no evidence to suggest that any UFO sightings posed a threat to the UK or that they were extraterrestrial in origin, and so you can take that up with all the abductees. It is clear that material that Pope wrote is still at the MOD, and he cannot share the MOD's view that conventional explanations could be found for all UFO sightings. So it sounds like Nick was right on the button with this. Pope's final postings in the MOD was to the Directorate of Defense Security, and in 2009, MOD announced that the UFO sightings would no longer be investigated, but Nick Pope has been investigated. So please welcome to the show, Nick Pope. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, what a resume you got here from... looks like from 1991. I mean, you've been kicking ass in the UFO field with the Ministry of Defense and all your amazing work, and they still say there's nothing to it?
Well, that's the public line, but of course, behind closed doors, the situation was very different. And we know, of course, from recent Freedom of Information Act requests that the Ministry of Defense, for example, sent 2 officers from Defense Intelligence to the Pentagon Five Eyes UFO Working Group meeting that was held in May 2023. So, you know, even when I was there was one line that we had for Parliament, the media, and the public, but what was going on privately behind closed doors was a different story.
All right, Nick, before we get to the whole panel here, because you're going to be barraged with questions for the next 50 minutes, I want you to tell to the listeners a little bit how you got started in the UFO field, what piqued your interest in it, and then how did you get into the Ministry of Defense and started working on the UFO file, and then after that, tell us what you found.
Well, sure. I had no interest in this subject until I was literally given this as a job to do for government. So I really knew nothing about the whole UFO phenomenon. I had no interest in it, never had a sighting or experience. And then I joined the Ministry of Defense as a civilian employee. They move you around every few years. And in 1991, I was due for a move at exactly the same time that the vacancy on the so-called UFO desk came up. And so I was asked if I wanted to do this for the next 3 years or so. And I said, sure. And it changed my life, of course. I went in there not knowing much about the subject, being fairly skeptical, just treating it as another government job. And then when I actually started to do it, both investigating the newly reported cases, but also looking back through the archive of files that went back decades. You know, of course, I wasn't the first one to do this by a long way. Gradually, I began to realize that there was something here that did raise important defense and national security issues, and particularly where, for example, these things were seen by military pilots, where they were filmed. Nowadays, of course, it would be on forward-looking infrared, where they were picked up on reconnaissance satellites, and where the data suggested that these things were capable of speeds, maneuvers, and accelerations that significantly exceeded the cutting edge of our own inventory of aerospace tech, whether that's aircraft, missiles, or drones.
So, doing all that, what did you start piquing your interest in? What was saying to your mind when you finally said, hey, this is really real?
Well, I think I became aware that this was the ultimate low probability, high impact scenario, which is a phrase that we use a lot in government, in contingency planning, but also the business community uses the phrase a lot. And it's for any scenario where even if you think that the chances of something happening are statistically quite small, the impact, if it does happen, is so vast that you really need to be in the game and at the table and fully immersed in it. So a good example of that, for example, is a literal impact from a comet or an asteroid. Statistically, it's a low probability, but if it happens, obviously it could be at the top end of the spectrum, an extinction level event. So you need to be ready, and you need to be watching out for it, and you need to be able to have some mitigation in place.
Right. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Padre right now, Dan Carlson, because I'm sure he's chomping at the bits to ask you something. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Polk, for being with us this evening. Question for you concerning your views on this subject and how they've evolved over the more than 3 decades that you've been doing this. I think that at one time, fairly early on, you held the view that there was an alien race engaged in hostile acts against humanity, and that in time you may have modified that view. What is your perspective on non-human intelligence and what they might want or be doing?
Yes, you're right. I think my views evolve over the years, and as they should, I think, particularly as new data become available. I started off, I think you would probably say, completely skeptical. Then I flipped the narrative and probably became what most people would call a believer. And now I've dialed it back somewhat, and my view is a more nuanced kind of assessment that there is something going on. There is a phenomenon. It may not have a single neat solution. In fact, it's unlikely to. I don't rule out the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but I certainly have not seen a smoking gun. And in terms, I think the transition from, I suppose, language like alien and extraterrestrial to non-human intelligence I find that helpful, actually, because I think it's a timely reminder that even if we are dealing with another intelligence, another civilization, it doesn't have to be extraterrestrial. There are all sorts of theories, as you know, on the table, everything from aliens and time travelers from the future through to some sort of demonic presence, something from other dimensions, or my favorite at the moment, which is something that we have neither the words to describe nor the kind of brain processing powers to even conceptualize.
Now, please elaborate. I mean, what
Nick, I got to stop you for a second because you froze. Oh. You froze when you said what your favorite was. Could you go over that again?
Oh, sure. My favorite is something that we have neither the words to describe nor perhaps the brain power to even conceptualize. So just like you can't explain quantum physics to a chimpanzee, well, you can, but they won't understand. So NHI might be at our current level of human evolution, just beyond us.
Do you still feel that they're malevolent? I think you held that view at one time.
You know, the default position of the Ministry of Defense and the military, not just on UAP, but on a whole range of things, is assume something is hostile or potentially hostile, and then allow yourself to be relieved if it turns out not to be the case. And that's a better mindset than assume it's fine and then get caught with your pants down if suddenly it goes south.
I understand. And what position do you hold?
I hold the better safe than sorry. Let's just assume it's hostile. and that may be wrong, but at least that way we could perhaps begin to think about what sort of mitigation strategies we might put in place.
Cobra, you're up.
Commander.
Well, thank you. A while back, Nick, and it's good to see you again, and great to chat with you. You probably don't remember me, but we had a nice, pleasant couple of words a few years back. I've seen no evidence that the government has an alien spacecraft hidden away in an Air Force hangar somewhere. If they do, I wasn't told about it, and I would have known. You still stand by that, one of your famous quotes?
Pretty much so, yes. Now, I would modify it slightly and say, of course, you can never say never. People often ask me, do I think it's possible that there was some sort of secret program doing pretty much the same that I was doing, but somewhere else and getting better cases and all of that? And I can say, of course, I can't rule out that possibility, but I had both the security clearance and the need to know. And so to the best of my knowledge, there was nobody else sitting above me doing it. But of course, who knows? Somewhere in the basement office in Ministry of Defense main building, several levels underground, there might be a little unit that maybe have more than I ever had.
I appreciate that viewpoint and that explanation, because I think that it's a fair way to do that. At what point do you think coming forward with your experience was noticed in your previous work with the ministry? Do you think that you were blocked out from seeing our access because you started to exhibit the signs of being someone who was going to come forward with information?
I don't think so. And certainly in the 3 years that I was actually doing that job, I really had not spoken out publicly. And in fact, the only times I spoke out publicly was when I was the official spokesperson.
Right.
So I had to go on TV and debunk all this. It was part of my job. And by the way, let me just circle back and make one point on the previous question, which I didn't make. Of course, one possibility is that nobody in the United Kingdom had access to this at all, because it may well be, and there are a lot of people who believe this, that the United States is the only nation that has access to an actual smoking gun. So it may be that nobody in the UK was read onto any of this.
Very good, sir. One last final question before I release you, because I know your time is valuable and limited. We've had a lot of folks in the last decade come out here in the States, your poor cousins in the colonies here, so to speak. And I don't want to put you on the spot to give me an assessment, but I would like your evaluation of things that have come forward. The more recent congressional hearings that we've had, and moving back, a number of books have come out, a number of agencies, a number of processes have been revealed. It has left me personally lacking. I don't want to speak for my other hosts here. I don't think that there's been a lot that's come forward that's convinced me that we are actually moving closer to disclosure. But what do you think is what has happened in the States last decade or so?
Oh, I think what's happened here in the US has absolutely transitioned this subject from fringe to mainstream. And we've gone from a situation where it was just regarded as all sort of crazy conspiracy talk and part I don't know, pop culture, part science fiction. And it's gone from that to, as you say, classified briefings and open hearings in Congress, multiple UAP provisions in each of the annual National Defense Authorization Acts for the last few years, whistleblowers coming forward, the Pentagon setting up first the UAP task force, then Arrow. So absolutely, I think it's been a real sea change. And as for the people who've come forward and spoken out, I mean, yeah, they all do seem to be who they say they are. or whether people like Jay Stratton, Lou Elizondo, James Lukatsky, David Grush. I've met Jay Stratton, I've met Lou Elizondo. I've not, to my knowledge, I've not met Dave Grush or James Lukatsky. And of course, there are some other people too coming forward, Matthew Brown, Jake Barber, some others. I think obviously the people that testify in front of Congress, you don't get anywhere near Congress without being thoroughly vetted in terms of, is he who he says he is? Was he posted where he said he was posted? Have some of these people made missteps and made some statements that obviously we don't yet have kind of solid corroboration for? Absolutely. But they do all seem to be the real deal, and that process is going on. And of course, there's more to come. We're going to have another House Oversight Committee hearing soon, and the new player on the scene, of course, is this new task force on the declassification of federal secrets, currently looking at JFK, next up UAP and USOs.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick.
Don.
I turn it over to the Silverback.
Yeah, Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Here we are, almost 80 years after this phenomenon exploded on the world stage. Now, in that time, of course, the United States, at the end of the Second World War, was undoubtedly, because of its acquiring atomic weapons, was the strongest player at that time on the stage when this happened. Now, in the last few years, all right, a lot has transpired. After Harry Reid, the former Nevada senator, came forward admitting that he had acquired $22 million, which he fed into the ATIP program to begin this search for whatever these things were. Suddenly, as you correctly stated, the situation changed dramatically. Suddenly, it was no more tinfoil hat wearing fools like the media often would do with the UFO story when they deigned to even broadcast anything on the subject. But recently, very recently, it's become almost common knowledge that there is a core secret that the elite, the military elite, intelligence elite, have been holding tightly to their breast, surrounded by an SAP, a special access program. Now, I've got to smile with all the years that I've been banging around in this field at the gullible people out there that think disclosure is on the cusp. My question to you is, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, has traditionally, since at least World War I, been one of our closest allies. You worked in the ministry on this problem, on this subject. Did you see much cross-pollination between your people and their American partners on the UFO question? And if so, what position, in your estimation, did the Americans take as opposed to what the United Kingdom officers did with this subject?
There is surprisingly little international collaboration on this, even between allies. And it's not just a question, you could say, well, NATO. It's really a non-issue in NATO. Even in the Five Eyes intelligence sharing alliance, which is the only place that there is currently any certainly US-UK interface on the UAP issue. Even within the Five Eyes, it seems to be a very small effort. We know that Sean Kirkpatrick, when he was director of Arrow, held at least one Five Eyes UAP working group meeting. So we know that the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are to some extent sharing information on UAP. But there's no getting away from the fact that the US is the big dog in the room. And certainly in terms of attitude on this, the US is very much leading the field with everything that's going on, even publicly, like the open congressional hearings, in a situation where the UK is really just very tight-lipped about this at the moment. But part of that is because very few, if any, members of Parliament are putting the Ministry of Defense under the pressure that the US Congress put the DoD under. So there are strong differences in the way that this has been handled.
Well, in 1991, a series of events erupted in the skies of NATO's capital. UFOs. They were pursued, chased by F-16s. It was quite a huge story at the time. I'm sure you recall that.
Oh, yes, very much so. And in fact, I subsequently met General Wilfred de Brouwer a couple of times, and I've had discussions with him about the sightings in Belgium, some similar sightings we had in the UK. By an interesting coincidence, which we were told never to believe in, by the way, of course, coincidences, three years to the very night after that incident where the Belgians scrambled two F-16s, we had a wave of very similar sightings over the UK. So yeah, I've had discussions with General de Brouwer. I had discussions at the time with the British Defence Attaché in Brussels, and yeah, it's a very interesting and potentially quite disturbing series of events for sure.
Well, I find it almost unbelievable that NATO would not at least have this stored away in their filing cabinets. It's a little known fact here, but going back 50, 60 years ago, on a couple of occasions, we went to a nuclear alert believing that the Soviet Union may have launched ICBMs when in fact they were stray aircraft flying along. So when something like this would happen, especially above NATO's capital, one would think that they would be very cognizant of what this could portend. And you telling me that they're what, blasé? Would that be the correct term?
No, I don't see that. I mean, the Belgian Air Force did a very thorough investigation into this, and I mean, even I wasn't directly involved, but like I say, I discussed this with the air attaché. Some British intelligence people went over there, and certainly I think the two F-16 pilots were actually interviewed. So the Belgians did a very thorough investigation, and certainly the UK and the US were aware of most of that. But the extent to which it was promulgated to other NATO nations, that I don't have visibility of, but my understanding is that it was not.
Well, just one last thing, and then I'll pass this along. But one of the early, and I guess it might today be considered somewhat of a conspiracy theory, but purportedly President John F. Kennedy, subsequent to his being murdered, had proposed to the DoD, the Pentagon, having a joint American-Soviet, I don't know if task force would be the correct term, but at least liaison with the Soviets over the UFO question. Now, in 1991, I had a chance to meet and then interview over a weekend down in Arizona Colonel Marina Popovich. I'm sure you know who Colonel Popovich was.
Yes.
Marina was she took cosmonaut training. Her husband had been General Pavel Popovich, the first man to ever rendezvous with another spacecraft in orbit back in about 1962. And she was shockingly, to me, quite forthcoming, unless she was spinning a tale. But she was very open about the UFO problem as she saw it from the former Soviet Union. Now, as an aside, during this time, I also had broken a story in UFO magazine, my wife and I published, in UFO magazine, about what happened to a USSR Mars probe, Phobos 2. And in that discussion, and I ended up writing an article for Omni magazine, in that discussion, Popovich told me something that in part I could verify, but basically that George H.W. Bush, Senior President Bush, okay, right after this Phobos incident happened, which in some quarters portended hostile ETs because their probe, according to Glav Cosmos, had been rammed by this object they encountered, had gone to see General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev on his yacht. I believe they were over in Malta. Bush undertook a tremendous amount of criticism in a small boat to get to Gorbachev's yacht. And they, according to Popovich, discussed this tentative liaison with the Russians. We all remember what Reagan said, that in the event an evil power from outer space came down, all the nations on Earth would have no choice but to band together. Now, you were there at that time in Europe, Nick. You were working for the ministry. Did you get any inkling of any of this, or was this totally outside your purview?
I think I'm going to have to give you a fairly short answer to that. And the short answer is we knew through intelligence sources that both Russia and China had programs looking at UAP, but we didn't know much about those programs. And of course, this is an area that I can't really discuss anyway. But yeah, we were aware and still are aware that they have programs. And yeah, Kennedy, absolutely. I don't know the extent to which any conversations segued into UAP. I know Kennedy did float the idea of closer cooperation with the Soviets over a space program more generally. Whether they then specifically discussed UAP, I'm not sure.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Nick, I want to pick up one of your cases that you had talked about, and I was very curious about this. It's called the Art Shop Encounter.
Yes.
It was a group of, and this kind of blew my mind a little bit because I'm trying to figure out how they figured this was extraterrestrials. There's a group of seemingly ordinary people enter this London shop, this art shop, and they browse around, and then after they browse around, all of them buy a pencil with a large denomination. The shopkeeper tells you, hey, they all came around looking at all this stuff, and then they said, oh, I want to buy this pencil. And then they come out with a 100-pound note or something like that. I don't know what it is, but it seemed like they connected that to some kind of extraterrestrial event.
Yes, this came up recently. I was a guest on Chris Ramsey's Area 52 podcast, and he asked a very interesting question. He said something like, tell me about a case that you really don't talk about, but that still puzzles you. And I had to think for a moment, and then I thought back to a book that I probably wrote now 25 years ago called The Uninvited.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that was your second book.
Yes, and it was about the abduction mystery. And one of the things that it was very clear to me looking at this was that, you know, although everyone has these ideas about the greys and the very sort of ordered idea that an abduction is a very structured thing. If you listen to people like Dave Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, they would walk you through an almost step-by-step manual of what it is that happens. My own experience, both interviewing people at the Ministry of Defense who came to us, but also looking at this in a private capacity afterwards, my own experience was that the reality was much more diverse, and that the phenomenon was far more bizarre and abstract and sometimes just almost surreal. People use the phrase the cosmic joker or cosmic trickster. Far more surreal than one might suppose. And this art shop, I don't have time to go into the full story, but suffice to say, you can get a sort of brief overview of it from Chris Ramsey's Area 52 podcast. But there's a whole chapter on this particular witness in The Uninvited. And I think when you look at that chapter and see, again, it's the idea that people don't have one-off experiences. They have a lifetime of encounters. And I'm tempted to say, we should be looking at the experiences, but we should also be looking at the people and saying, why is it that certain people seem to act as attractors to this sort of phenomenon?
Now, she had a second encounter, too, because she had what they call a time slip, where she thought she saw herself in the future.
Yes. Somebody came in
where it's credible.
Yeah, I know this person quite well, and I'm a fairly good judge of character, and again, there's more to it than I can really give justice to in a brief chat like this. But suffice to say that the whole story was much more deep and nuanced than I could really get across answering a question here. But again, like I say, it just illustrates that the phenomenon seems sometimes very different from the way that the media portray it.
Okay. And my second question to you, and this is something Don and I have talked about in Commander, and we all actually talked about this because during one of the congressional hearings while they're interviewing David Grush, David comes out and says this secret is so sensitive that people have been murdered over it. And I wanted to get I wanted to get your take when he comes out and says that, because that's pretty diabolical that you're going to kill somebody over this.
It is. I don't have any direct evidence that would support that claim. And obviously, now that is in the public domain, I hope that Congress are going to take that seriously and look into it, bringing in law enforcement as necessary. And it's interesting that people like Lou Elizondo have recently talked about the FBI taking a role in this. And I hope that is following up those accusations, because there can be few, if any, accusations more serious than this. And incidentally, circling back to a point that was made earlier, this isn't just an unacknowledged, it's not just a special access program. It's a waived, unacknowledged SAP. So if these secrets, if there are these legacy intelligence community programs on crash retrieval and reverse engineering, and if there is a project that acts as a gatekeeper to all of this, it's buried very, very deep.
Well, let's not forget, okay, I got to break in here just shortly. In 1947, the National Security Act was signed into law by the federal government, by the President, Harry Truman. And in that act, it specifies that in the event of a national emergency or a national security risk, they can use any and all extra legal actions, which means our mundane good and bad laws that I used to enforce as a police officer, Chris enforced as a police officer, go right out the window. And the feds can basically do what they think they have to do. So the idea of whacking somebody by the government and having the FBI come in and investigate it and prosecute, you can forget it.
Well, that's why we need this new task force to step up to the plate. And I know James Comer has spoken about how this might go down. Obviously, Anna Paulina Luna, who heads it up, has got a lot to look at, because it's not just UAP and USOs. As I mentioned, of course, it's JFK, RFK, MLK, Epstein client list, COVID origins, and some 9/11 material too. So there's a lot to grip.
Dan, you're muted, Dan.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. You have quite a busy schedule, Mr. Pope, and you have some things coming up. I want to make sure we give you time to touch on that. We have, is it Contact in the Desert in Pine Bush? Are you going to be at both of those events? And if so, what are you going to be doing there?
Yes, Contact in the Desert is actually, I think, May 29th through to June 2nd. The Pine Bush UFO Festival is June 7th, so I'm going to be coming to New York State and doing that. And I'm going to be there for the whole time. I'm going to be giving, obviously, a fixed, a presentation, but also, of course, I'm just going to be mingling with attendees. Hopefully people will come up and say hello, and, on past form, they'll tell me some sightings, some experiences, their theories. Everyone will grab a selfie, and we'll all have good fun. So Contact in the Desert next weekend, and then Pine Bush on June 7th. I'm also, of course, doing Ancient Aliens Live. I moderate the traveling live show. This Saturday, we're in Vegas for a one-off show. Then we take a summer break. We're back in the fall and winter with about, 16, 17 more shows. I have a couple of new films out. There's a documentary, a fairly new one called Alien Awakening, which is out there. And then there's another one, which I think is coming out soon, called Aliens from the Abyss, the dark side of the UFO phenomenon, where I take the idea that, as I think one of you said earlier, this has been going on for nearly 80 years. And my take is, so we know that disclosure isn't easy, because if it was, we'd have done it by now. And that poses the question, if it's not easy, why is it difficult? And I've recently speculated that perhaps it's because it comes with a dark side, what I characterize as a secret too terrible to be told. So yeah, I'm doing a series of, like I say, I've got these new films out, but next up, May 24th, Vegas. Next weekend, Contact in the Desert in Palm Springs, and then June 7th, Pine Bush.
Now, you mentioned this darkness or dark
Oh,
side.
sorry, one more. Phenomicon, of course. That's the one. And last year, of course, I was at Phenomicon, and that's a great event. And next thing, Travis Taylor and Jay Stratton come running over and say, "Hey, quick, let's go to the ranch." And of course, we ended up at Skinwalker Ranch. So that was pretty fun. Sorry, let me interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that ties in with I was going to ask about the dark side, and then you mentioned you've been to Skinwalker Ranch, and I can't let you go without telling us what your experience there was like.
Well, I was obviously very glad to get the opportunity to go there, and particularly go there with people like Travis Taylor, Jay Stratton, William Henry was there, bunch of other people. So yeah, now I will tell you, I did not see or experience anything unusual, and neither did anything follow me home, as of course some people say with this so-called hitchhiker effect happens to them. Nothing happened to me, which is interesting, because I think it goes back to the question when we were talking about aliens in the art shop and the whole alien abduction, alien contact. Why is it that this seems to affect some people and not others? Is an element of this to do with differences in ourselves, our characters, our personalities, the way in which our brains are wired. Are some people perceiving things that pass other people by? Or is it something else? I don't have answers to those questions, but yeah, I was very happy to get the opportunity to go to Skinwalker Ranch. And when Phenomicon comes back, I think it's first week of September down in Vernal, I'm fully hoping to get a second visit. And, who knows, maybe things will go a different way next time. But I know, obviously, I've spent a lot of time with people like Travis. I know that they are at 100% convinced that something really spooky is going on, and that there are some really profound discoveries that hopefully we're on the verge of making.
Thank you. Commander.
Well, I guess my biggest thing is, sir, I hope you have safe travels for these trips. What's next? What's on the, I won't say agenda because that's not really the kind of word I want to use, but what's on your target list coming up next that you're going to work on?
Well, I think if I can, and I don't want to kind of, drop any names and things, but obviously if I can, stay in touch with some of the people whose names are known in this field, but also maybe some of the people in the new political administration. If I can play a part in any of this, likely this won't be in front of the cameras. This will be behind the scenes, behind closed doors. But if I can, you said right at the beginning, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm not pretending that I've got any better answers than anyone else, but I have, over those years, amassed some useful information and contacts and just knowledge about how to get things done. And behind the scenes, I will be continuing conversations with various people to try and move the needle forward. And I'm sorry if that sounds cryptic. I don't want to kind of imply that I'm at the heart of all sorts of things. I'm just hoping that I can contribute.
No, I think it sounds pretty exciting, and I like the viewpoint.
Thank you,
Don. Finish it up.
Well, to tell you the truth, I really don't have anything more to ask, but there is, and I don't know if you've been following it or not, there's a lot of discontent today out among the, if I can be so bold, the UFO faithful, with a lot of these names that feel like they've been basically strung along. And this has been a problem in this field forever, right? Obviously. But there have been shows like Unidentified, which ran on the History Channel. And I noticed one thing about each of those episodes, Nick, that at the end of each one, they stressed a possible potential threat. So I came to the conclusion with my military background, my law enforcement background, that they were either attempting a soft disclose on something potentially coming down the road, or this is the biggest dog and pony show the Pentagon has ever graced the public with. Do you ever get that feeling?
I think it goes back to this point that it's better to assume a threat and then be relieved than assume no threat and get caught out. But allied to that is all these people know full well that the only way that they will get Congress to engage on this is to approach it from the, is there a potential threat here? There's no way people like Chuck Schumer and Marco Rubio and Kirsten Gillibrand and Tim Burchett and all the rest, there's no way that they would have touched this issue unless it had been framed in the language of potential threat, defense and national security issue, and a little bit of safety of flight thrown in too. So I think they had to play it that way to get the stakeholder engagement from inside government, the military, and the intelligence community. It was never going to happen any other way. I mean, I understand that there is frustration in the UFO community. People always want, everything all at once. And yes, I get that people are concerned that they're being strung along and it's, where's the beef? What I would say in defense of all of the people that I think we're talking about is they have to play it very, very carefully. And almost everything they say or write has to be pre-submitted to DOPSA, the Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review at the Pentagon. So it's not like they can just dump everything out there. So it is, unfortunately, a great line from the movie Contact, but it's a case of small moves.
Well, for what it's worth, I am fully 1,000% convinced this will never be disclosed. I think the long-term goal, this is from me now, only me, will be just to throw enough out there to give the public something to chew on, never getting to the heart of the beef, ever. That's now, my take on it.
A final thought on that, of course, which hardly ever gets discussed, but of course in all of this, it may well be that the phenomenon itself gets the final vote and has the final say.
Interesting.
Well, it's great to see you, Nick. Safe travels. You have a lot of travel coming up. And look forward to hopefully catching up with you this year.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Have a great
Thank you, Nick, for being here.
Everyone.
Thank you, Nick.
Bye now.
Have a good night. All right. Well, that concludes our interview with Nick Pope. And he came out with some interesting things. Looking at his background and stuff, I really wanted to ask him about that art shop encounter because I was trying to decipher where there would be an extraterrestrial type of thing with people just buying a pencil. A group of people going and buying a pencil. I guess maybe extraterrestrials would be interested in pencils. I don't know. I've never met an extraterrestrial.
It is such a vintage vignette of British, UK stories. If you go back and read accounts to the 1900s, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the diving men, the airships. It seems so in line with a lot of the things that I have read and had people explain to me over the years. I think the UK in general has a kind of unique vibe to it on these subjects.
Pretty unique.
And I think. I don't think it's a big leap for most folks in the UK to see the paranormal aspect of what goes on with aerial phenomena. They don't have a hard time, or having that as a dual subject.
One of the things that he mentioned, and I'm wondering why he walked it back, because his book Uninvited was about the abduction phenomenon. Which, based on the title and some of the stuff he was saying, that, this is a hostile event. I might be using too strong of a word, hostile, but I consider it hostile. And then his
criminal, at least criminal.
Criminal, oh, absolutely. And then, his first thoughts were, wow, this is really bad. There's a group of people here abducting people or causing problems here, and he walks it back when I think all of us have a feeling of, distrust in this extraterrestrial phenomenon because they've never done anything good so far as I could see. Right, Dan? Have you seen anything?
You have to, I know that there's seems to be a growing wing in ufology these days of people, who want the Space Brothers to come and save us from all of our ills. And, you have to ask yourself, if that is their intent, what have they been doing for the last 80 years? I mean, they could have come and at any point and said, hey, let's give you all a hand with diseases and technology. If you'll just say, everybody just put the nukes down. No. Parent comes into a room, kids put down the matches, and we're going to go to the ice cream store. Just give us a little something if you are here for our benefit.
Oh my gosh, Padre, you got so many things packed in there. First, you think you're telling me only 80 years that this has been going on. When we have biblical references in one of the oldest and most important books in civilization that indicate extraterrestrial as well as UAP/UFO activity. So I think that there's probably
You're right.
just a tad bit more there.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, and you and I profess our Christianity, then that's the same complaint that I hear a lot of non-Christians tell me. Well, if God exists, why would he allow us to do all these things? So I don't mean to take this into the theological right as we go to the break, but if they're part of the same cosmic universe family, they may be operating under the same rules.
Yeah. Now we're on the same page, because if I'm talking primarily those who would say this is not related to God or demons or angels or anything like that. This is purely a sign. If you look at it and you're trying to explain,
why not?
From well, I'm just saying people who would say that it doesn't have anything to do with that. They would say that what we're, like you said, the same argument they say about God. Why doesn't he intervene and so forth? And we got like 30 seconds here, but my point is that
no pressure sermon here, but you got to bang it out in 15 seconds.
Well, we can carry it over. We'll carry this over. Why don't we go to break right now? We'll carry this over on the next half. Folks, stay with us. We're going to get into some real good discussion here, and we're going to break for a few minutes. I think
Don and I are going to go get spiritual on the break.
We are back at UAP Crossfire, and we were discussing whether the aliens are good or bad or in between. And Dan, you were finishing up.
Right. So I was inarticulate earlier. Being a believer in God, believer that there is a divine plan and a divine individual overseeing everything that transpires. Commander Cobra mentioned that maybe these entities, whatever they are, have to follow the same rules. And that would fall underneath the umbrella of Christian belief that a sovereign God is in charge of all these things that transpire. And we can question motives and say, why this, why not that, and so forth. But I do think that for those who don't ascribe to that particular belief, and are trying to look at this from a purely science, absent any divine intelligence overseeing everything, one must ask that question. Because if someone asks me, why doesn't God do X? I can answer usually some of those questions. But if you ask them, why haven't they? I think that is a legitimate, if we're thinking of them as entities like us that have needs for nourishment, breath, or the things of life, and they're coming here, why are they here? That's the big question. Ultimately, I think every independent thinking being is interested in its own survival. And we have to assume that they are interested in the same. And their, whatever you want to call their quality of life might be, they're here because they see that they can obtain something from us. I think that that's just the nature of life. You see that in animals. They're all basically self-interested. We're a very selfish species when you look at the things that we've done. So I have a hard time believing that these space brothers are here just out of the goodness and kindness of their heart and they don't want anything in return. And I wonder if one day we aren't going to get the "it's a cookbook" moment from from that toss that to the Twilight Zone fans out there. But
okay, let me throw this at you, Padre, before Commander. I ask Commander, what about the Anunnakis? The word is, or always the belief was, the Anunnakis use us as slaves to mine their gold, to use us as that. So they're being an extraterrestrial. They come down here. They say, hey, look at these guys hanging around. They're not too developed yet. Why don't we use them as slaves? And they did.
So
right?
I think if you look at the scriptures and even some of the extra scriptural books like Enoch. You'll find that the belief here, if you're asking what my opinion is, that there was a rebellion led by Lucifer, and it says a third of the angels fell with him. And I think that there were angels involved in the creation of the universe.
Okay.
That God was using them to help make it. And then what happened was, for whatever reason, they decided that they could do things better than he. And so they were thrown down to earth as their prison, if you will. And so they're roaming around earth as demons. Well, some of these, way back when, may have mated with human women and produced this species of giants.
Nephilim.
Yeah, the Nephilim. And if these beings, I mean, we have to try to put ourselves in the mindset of an ancient person who's encountering what to them is a non-human intelligence. And you can call them Anunnaki, you can call them fallen angels, you can call them whatever. But from the extra biblical sources, we get that these beings were very mean to humans, enslaved, abused.
They ate them.
Yeah, well, yeah. When eventually,
they get any meaner than that.
Yeah, the Nephilim, they're the ones who started eating humans, and then things turned, and there was a rebellion against them, and so now we have some of those. Scripture says that group of angels that fell there was an intervention by God who has them chained up in darkness until the end judgment. So those individuals who would have been the Anunnaki, now they're in a prison somewhere waiting for judgment day. But the Nephilim, they were these giant beings who were warring with each other as well as warring with humanity. They were eating people, they were brutalizing people, they were sexually abusing women, and finally God said, let's hit the reset button. And there was a flood, global flood. Noah and his 6 family members were saved, and then we began the whole process again. So that's a very concise way of putting the biblical perspective on what transpired in those days. So I think that getting back to this as to what is the ultimate motivation of a species? It's survival. It's to carry on and improve the species if you're just looking at it from a scientific point of view. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we have that they need? Why are they here? Is it for us or is it for the resources? And if they're not spiritual, then I think there has to be a level of malevolence in there. And, even if they're nice to us, why are they being nice to us?
Where are they nice?
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything.
Some people say they have these experiences where they summon the orgs and they commune with them and they get, Jake Barber said in his interview that he had this overwhelming sensation of peace and love and, some unlike anything that he felt. Well, there's some people who do drugs.
If nobody else is going to say it, I will. Some
Go,
people
Don.
are simply full of shit.
Oh, well.
There's always that.
Yeah,
there's medicine for that. Yeah. So
I don't know what to say after that one. All right. Well,
so
go ahead, Padre.
I was just saying, Cobra, you're kind of my foil in these matters, and I'm sure you're biting your tongue right now. What do you think on that?
Well,
go ahead,
obviously the tongue is forked, so we I won't show that on screen. But no, I agree with you. I just wanted to point out, since we have we've engaged with there's some folks from the audience that have brought these kind of matters up in the last couple of weeks in email to you and you've shared with me. I've followed some of that conversation. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of reference that goes to that. I think that there is a lot of validity to what you say that makes sense to me, that it fits in a lot of the experiences that are recorded. And I'm going to also throw the other side of the coin. I agree with Don. There's a lot of people that are full of crap on this. Mm-hmm. And they just want to talk about stuff and sell books and show up at conferences. And I think that now we are on a revival of activity. in this. We've had definitely an upsurge in the last, I would say, at least since the first Trump administration, has been a greater upsurge in activity. So 2015, 2016 time period. And folks are going to start popping in. They're going to be talking more about it. But at the same time, with all these disclosure movements, disclosure activities, forums of different kind from government and part of it, I don't see the needle moving that much. Now, my fallback position on this. I don't need the government to tell me what I believe. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I'm one of those people that doesn't. Would I like to know more of it? Absolutely.
Well, let me disclose something. Okay, this is breaking news here on UAP Crossfire. I was contacted about a month ago by a gentleman who represents a group of pastors from around the country, as well as lay leaders. Those would be people that help with church ministry, who are very interested and very concerned in the UAP subject. And so now we meet monthly in a Zoom call, and the levels of concern vary in a number of topics here. Pastors and priests are, I don't want to say struggling, that's too strong a word, but are concerned and wrestling with this whole issue and what it means or could mean to matters of faith. And in the course of this panel of discussion, I met two individuals who are, in our parlance, they are Bible-believing evangelical Christians who are abductees and continue to be abducted in ongoing experiences. And that's new for me. That's something that I hadn't heard, because many times there are things that are done through prayer that can stop the issues. And I had not yet met anyone who was unsuccessful in that. And it's got me searching and looking at, why is it the case? And it was brought up in that Zoom call that there appear to be, and we don't know what the magic ingredient is, certain people that these beings latch onto. You talk about the hitchhiker effect, that once they get their claws into you, they follow you around and they manifest themselves in various ways. And that's got me asking a lot of questions. You guys have any input on that?
Yeah. Commander?
Well, I'll just quickly say that it doesn't, I find that, again, compatible to what I understand within my faith and within the structure of almost every major faith on the planet, that we are susceptible to these kinds of things. In the case of Christianity, if I am able to truly identify with Christ, I have the ability to move mountains. I have the ability, and Chris has talked in the past about people who have shouted out in the situation an exclamation to Christ, and it has changed that situation in the moment. So all those things kind of fit to the to teachings, as well as the methodology of different faiths that I've been involved in, especially around Christianity. So that doesn't surprise me. It does. It also doesn't surprise me that people that are in the faith leadership, in the roles of ministers and other religious people, are worried about what this means. It surprises me a little bit, but we're competing with, or religion is competing with, handheld devices, the internet, the attention span that has been winded down. We had an interesting talk not too long ago. Are we more productive now than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Okay. Because people seem to be working more, right? I mean, you're always on your computer, you're always on your phone, you're doing stuff, you're sending emails, but really, are we more productive? And I don't think we are. I don't think that we are producing really any more. I think we have ways that we can produce things faster, maybe not necessarily more precise or better, but we can do things faster. And I see the whole spectrum. You can goof off more, right?
Yeah.
And then be able to really close it up quickly in the last 15 minutes. This is one of the things that I've seen in a forum on AI that I sat through. And the key thing that people that are really pushing is, if you're using AI as a means not to work, you're going to get chewed up. You're going to be left in the dust. You're not going to be able to really compete on the. If you're using AI to write your papers while you're in school, to give you the speeches, to do the stuff, you're going to get chewed up. But if you're using AI as a means to increase your productivity, increase your mental part of it, then you will be able to grow and to exceed capability in the same amount of time. And I'm curious what AI impact is going to be on the UAP thing, because I think that's really one of the next little stones that's going to drop in the pond here and send out its ripples. There's going to be a series.
I think Don and I just did a show on AI.
You guys did a show about AI. It was a great show, by the way. I'm talking about AI specifically giving discourse to what is coming next, what is going on with UAPs, making predictions, making stuff go forward. And I think it's going to take a large group of people into very obscure and dark places in many cases. And it's not going to move the needle very much, because AI is not divinely given to us. It is our creation, and we are flawed creatures. And that's the reason why I am very concerned when I have counterparts in the world that I still operate in. Oh, we're just going to stick AI in that aircraft or that missile, and we're just going to send it on its happy way. We don't have to put people in it. It's all going to be better.
Don.
We don't have the power to run any of this stuff, but that's okay. That's just a footnote.
Well, also with the thing with AI is they're finding that it's fallible. It has faults because it can hallucinate. It can be taught to lie. It can deceive.
It is the creation of man, Chris.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
So
I mean, we do all those things. I do it pretty good.
But you're saying it almost like you're a little bit surprised.
No, I'm not surprised. I'm a little frightened because it gets in the hands of people like doctors, and he uses AI to diagnose what's ever wrong with me. And the guy says, the hell with this guy, or the AI misdiagnosed me.
But that's happening now, Chris. That very diagnosis.
I'm not disputing that, Commander. I'm saying, yeah, but it can get worse. Suppose AI, and we'll get into this, and I'll get Don in this. Don, I think AI is not at a point where we could use it because it's kind of it's got problems. Let me put it that way. What's your feeling?
Well, first, I've got a little vignette back when Padre was talking. This reminded me of something that happened to my wife, Vicki. My wife and her partner, Sherry Stark, began publishing UFO magazine in 1986, okay? And she'll be the first to tell you, she had stars in her eyes when they first started dealing with this topic. Now, back in 86, hey, that's like talking about the Battle of Thermopylae, okay, in 480 BC. But they started to make a splash with this publication, and Vicki had been invited on a number of television shows. One of them was a religious show. There were quite a few religious programming back in those days. Now, I'm not talking about CBS, NBC, or ABC, but on smaller stations, kind of like TBS was. And so she went in there, and the pastor that was the host, okay, was a nice enough guy. I by the way, I saw the video of this later. But then he started to bore in on the idea that this entire phenomenon was demonic, okay? And Vicki fended him off pretty well, but at the very end, he said something that he thought would finish the discussion. And my wife looked up at him and she said, "Do you remember what our Lord Jesus Christ said? In my Father's house, there are many mansions." And the guy was flabbergasted. And that was the end of the program. Okay. Now, to get back to what we were talking about, we were also, before I get to AI, Chris, we were also, and you can turn your timer there, Padre, if you want to go ahead and flip that. Don't forget.
The new Don clock. Okay, here we go.
There you go. As I stated many, many, many times, and if you read those papers I sent you, Padre, you'll get a flavor for this too. If we have even one group of visitors coming here, and I don't care how they get here, they could get here in saucers, they can pop through reality, however it is. If we have one, we have more than one. And in my paper, I specified that according to Ingo Swann, when he was remotely viewing the far side of the moon, okay, for that secretive government group, whoever they were, okay, he discovered that they were extremely psychic. And they almost immediately detected him through the psychic process that he was utilizing. And he said they did not like that at all. He became convinced they saw human beings with a psychic talent as a potential threat to them. Now, we were talking about people that apparently get continuously abducted. And not only people, but it goes through family lines, as I discovered when we were publishing UFO Magazine. We had more than 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 people come forward and talk about, well, you know, my grandmother said this. And, oh yeah, my mother said that. My aunt said that. Oh, my uncle. You know, it's happened to him too. It's as if they follow certain bloodlines. Why? I have no idea. And as a matter of fact, it might be interesting, now that I think about it, to even find out what blood type these people were, okay, to see if that may be a contributing factor. God, I wish I had thought about that before, but that's something might be worth following up on. So to make a long story short,
RH factor?
I'm sorry?
Aren't they following like an RH factor, some type of bloodline with RH or something?
Well,
that's very possible.
In his book, he says that these people that seem to be gifted with like the remote viewing thing, he was alarmed at how many of them had Cherokee blood in them, that their ancestry could be traced. They were, including himself, he found out, is, you know, partial Cherokee. And so that really intrigued people that he was hanging around with who were looking into this thing. Anyway, I'm sorry, Don, I interrupted.
No, that's very interesting.
Did you stop the flow of sand while you interrupted him?
I'm sorry. Here, I'll give it.
I reclaim. Don, tell him to reclaim your time. Reclaim your time.
My God, I want my time back.
I want the grains of sand returned to my clock.
They're returning.
But anyway, now AI. Look, as I said, and I'm told all you guys. I know I told Chris. I barely knew. I mean, I certainly knew what it was purported to be, but I barely knew anything about it until I had somebody use the process on me before he even met me. Okay. And that was through Chris. And Chris sent me the readout, which I got to tell you, it was, in a way, it was kind of freaky. But then he did an AI analysis on both my papers. And I got to tell you, I enjoyed reading that more than going back and reading my actual papers. That was a hell of a job he did on that. But it's scary, yeah. Now, Chris and I discussed the AI thing last week on DMR, on Dark Matters Radio. And when he said that AI, once it apparently begins to develop its own personality, okay, this is where it gets sketchy and scary. And I jokingly said, but I there's more truth to it than not, that everything I need to know about AI, I learned in 1984 when I went to see James Cameron's film, The Terminator. That's all about AI, Skynet, okay? Now that is what terrifyingly could possibly be down the road in our future. I don't know what you guys think about that. But if the military begins developing robotic things, and they are, okay, they are developing robotic apparatus for the battlefield. Oh boy, that could get dicey too. Okay,
Well,
you can flip it up, Padre.
No, okay. All right.
I would have said that wasn't feasible until about a year ago, where now you're starting to see Elon Musk come back with this robot that can do things more agile than a human. That AI has now been able to communicate with other AI, and they developed their own language at one point. And then the stuff that AI does as far as developing its own consciousness. And I know, Commander, we've talked a little bit, and I think, didn't they do a background on you with AI?
No, I asked you guys to do that, but to do it based just on the Commander Cobra show tag to see what comes up. So
I thought they actually did one.
That's what he did. He
Right.
did do that just on the Commander Cobra.
I haven't seen anything.
Oh, well, we'll
I'd
have
be
to
curious.
send it to you. I'm pretty sure. Don, didn't you get a copy of that?
Yeah, so did you, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought he
My
sent
two
one.
AI buddies, obviously developing their own secret network here, and they're not going to share with me. That's fine.
Well, you've been in and out and gone and, coming back, and we never know where you're at.
Right.
I didn't see it either. I mean, I don't know, Cobra. We're kind of the cool
I think
kids are
this is
shutting us
just
out.
payback because we're talking to evangelicals and they're getting concerned. So
No,
this
I got it.
no, it's okay, Chris. I understand. I
No,
don't think
listen,
it
there's a
personal.
spiritual component to this whole thing. I mean, you look at the past. I like to look at the past history of ufology and try to look at what's going on as a timeline. And my personal belief is there's a spiritual component to this. What it is, I don't know. Thank God the Nephilims are gone, because
Are they?
were still around.
Are they? How do you know that?
Well, they haven't eaten
Did
me.
AI
Let me tell you,
yeah.
if they seen me, that they
Did
were
AI
looking
tell
at me
you
at a
that,
piece
Chris?
of.
Is that where you're getting that from? AI told you that?
No, AI didn't tell me that. What I'm saying
Right.
to you is
But you're
that
getting all upset.
I'm
you get all
upset
upset
because
because
if they're still around, they're going to look at me like that piece of Japanese beef, that waku. They're gonna say, holy crap, where's this guy been hiding?
He's nicely marbled.
Yeah, look at the marble on that guy. Folks, we got 4th of July barbecue happening right here. So
That's why I got an attack beagle, Chris.
Oh,
She keeps us safe.
Yeah, I'm sure the attack beagle is going to do a lot with a Nephilim. That's 9 feet tall or something. But anyways, there is a spiritual component. But my belief is that UFOs and extraterrestrials are not here to help us.
no. And if you're, my
They just
my
haven't done
perspective is
anything through the entire timeline. Name me one thing. There's one case. I was just going to say, there's only one case where a lady said she had great sex with a reptilian. And that was the only case I ever
Pamela
had.
Stonebridge, I remember that well.
that's disgusting.
Well, all I'm saying
the
is
story
that's the only
or
case.
something else that you want to share.
No, just the story.
Oh, okay.
And stuff. But anyways, that's my component, is that I truly believe that we're going to destroy ourselves because our technology is not keeping up with our spiritual component.
Maybe,
I think
maybe
our
not.
technology is our spiritual component is in the is in the toilet. That's the problem.
Wow. Okay.
Hey, look at what happened in D.C. last night. Okay, horrific. My God, I couldn't believe it. You know, 2 young people walking out of the Jewish Museum. There's a Hamas supporter out there, guns them down in cold blood. No reason whatsoever other than hate. And here's what we're dealing with today. Okay, the hate. Yep. Look, if there's a time for a savior to make their appearance, I would say now would be a great time.
Well, we may not be far from that. I mean, if you look at like the biblical prophecy line, there are things happen in the book of Revelation that really could not have happened until a time such as this. There are incidents that occur that would require a global surveillance network, interconnected economies, people used to seeing strange things in the sky. And
you're right.
Basically the Cliff Notes version, even shorter than that, is the world will descend into increasing chaos, increasing hatred, increasing violence, until this individual arises and says, I've got all the answers. And he has amazing answers. This individual will draw the whole world to himself and establish a singular world government. And everything's going to be hunky-dory initially until he starts to reveal his dark side. And people
I don't want to give anybody ideas, but that individual you're referring to, we basically call it the Antichrist. Okay,
yep.
We basically call it that. But okay, what's the one thing that will point out who the Antichrist is? What should have been a fateful head wound.
Oh, you're talking about the beast, yeah. Someone takes him out, and then he's not really taken out. That's yeah. Appears to come back from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
But what
you don't know it that I was studying to be a minister.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry.
Where did you derail on that particular career path?
Well, this is fodder for another show. But
it was
for
the
another
violin
time.
lessons came to an end.
But no, believe me, I was.
Were you coming out of John's bar or something after that? I think I'll be a minister.
No, I was coming out of Vietnam after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That changes a guy. Yeah. No,
Well,
at any rate,
the life and death experiences that you had, that it doesn't surprise me.
The concern that these pastors have, and it's initially the concern that kind of brought me back into this, is that there is going to be a time of great deception, and people who don't understand or don't take the time to really understand why they believe what they believe will be easily led into the camp of this individual. And that is, it's predicted in the Bible. And we're exhorted by the words of Scripture and by our Savior to watch, to be on guard that you are not deceived, because many will come claiming to have all the answers, but in the end they don't. And he says, don't go after them. And these are some of the things that they'll do. And I can't condense the whole New Testament into 15 minutes here, but I would suggest if you
AI could.
Yeah, could. But if you haven't
get an executive summary, you bet.
If you haven't picked up a Bible lately, pick one up and start reading it. There's stuff in there you need to know. And even if you don't believe in God, there's some really good life lessons in there. And I would encourage you.
Let's not forget the Old Testament.
Yes.
All right. Originated from the Torah.
Yep.
Okay. Abraham, father of the Hebrews, came out of Mesopotamia, Samaria.
Of the Chaldeans.
The city of Ur.
Exactly. And so many of those early biblical stories were prior to the Torah, were Sumerian stories, including the flood.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's be precise about that.
Yeah, Epic of Gilgamesh. He encounters an individual there where it talks about a flood. In fact, there's the flood story, if I remember correctly, something like 230 different cultures around the world have a flood story in their cultural history. China has it. Even here in South Dakota, the Lakota Sioux have a story about a brave in a great flood who rescued animals and other people in his canoe. And they eventually touched down on a mountain, you can almost see from my house here, called Bear Butte. That was their Mount Ararat. So there's a lot of overlap in these. And it also causes one to think about, you have hieroglyphics or pictographs, very similar, from Sumeria that match up to ones in Brazil, that match up to ones in Mexico, that match up to ones in the Australian outback.
And what does that suggest?
It suggests at one time humanity was one people. And
worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide.
And they were wiped out probably by the Younger Dryas event, 11,600 years ago.
Could have been that. Could have been a global flood, too.
Or that caused the global flood.
Or it could have been when God decides that we're going to have different languages and just physically disperses people all over the planet.
Yep.
I mean, there is a lot that's there. Again, it's an important resource. And as the Padre says, even if you do not believe in this all-seeing being, this architect of the universe, it's well worth having it as a comparison document to all the other parts, because you will find that I think a lot of the experiences that people report are based on maybe youthful or shared experience with the Bible or the Torah. There is the Book of Islam. I mean, the Tao, the Quran. I mean, it's all there. I mean, it's there, and it's worth having the discussion. I think it's incredibly intriguing when Don's talked over the last few shows how it ties into other historical records. It adds validity to me. One interesting thing about your group, Padre, before we slide off that, that's always been the reported kind of famous finding in the RAND study. If it comes out that we've been visited, that there are extraterrestrials, one of the items, the economy will fail, faith and control by government will be in crisis, and there'll be a huge upheaval in religious belief, that people will doubt what they have accepted or have followed as part of their religion. And I've yet to quite always figure that one out. You're either pretty superficial or you're not really reading it. But I guess I shouldn't be so caustic in my description there. But I've talked to a number of people that range around my age, into their 30s, that are religious people, and they just don't seem to have that same kind of crisis. That it's incompatible, that it doesn't fit. What do you think?
I think that we have yet to see the manifestation of what these deceptors are going to be able to do. They're going to do things that at the surface appear to be miraculous, and people will shift their allegiances. You know that, Cobra, that we can be absolutely convinced of something one day, and then the next day there's some new piece of information. So, well, I guess I was wrong about that. It's because the true faith, true belief involves the heart, the mind, and the soul. And some people they go to church simply because they've always gone to church, or they're say, I believe in Jesus, I believe in the Bible, and so on and so forth. But then when push comes to shove, and a new show comes to town that, I never saw a pastor in church do that kind of thing, and it's miraculous, there's this deception. It's such a strong deception that Scripture even tells us that were it even possible that the elect, those who have been chosen by God to experience eternity with Him and permitted to do so, that they could be deceived. But he says if it were possible, and it won't be possible. And then we get into deeper theology. But there is going to come deception. And right now, what are people looking for? You see all these demonstrators, whether they're left wing, right wing, or whatever wing they're on, they're trying to hitch their wagon to something. They're trying to look for their significance of their life. I attended a little seminar at a Denver Comic-Con a few years ago. I was an aspiring novelist at that time. I was writing my first sci-fi novel. And I asked this gentleman who had written a whole series of successful horror novels, I said, what is the one thing that everybody is afraid of that you found? When you're trying to think of what's the scary monster going to be in that, is it burning to death? Is it spiders? What's one thing that almost always causes people to recoil? And he thought for a moment. He said, dying having lived an inconsequential life. That's the thing that people fear the most. They want to be relevant. And we got a couple of detectives here. When you're interviewing a criminal who's finally fessing up to what he's done, what is a big motive sometimes on some of the most heinous crimes? I want to be noticed. I want to be famous. I want someone to know my name. I want someone to
we call it the 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
they wanted their 15 minutes on television.
Yeah.
Many of them are narcissists.
Go ahead, Don.
I'm saying many of them turn out to be narcissists. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have the right to tell me no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Overestimation of themselves, because no one else has ever given them any attention. Nobody else has given them any worth. So they get so angry inside and say, well, I'm going to go show people that they're not worth anything. Am I right, guys? I mean, is that what some of these serial killers
don't disagree with that.
I don't disagree with it either. I think there's a lot of good faith in that. But I just wanted to pivot back to one thing that I think is setting up for us for our demise, whether it's spiritual or ourselves or whatever. I think we're heading down the wrong path with technology. Now, technology is great, but I think we use it in ways that becomes bad. And what I'm saying to you is that our technology hasn't caught up to, or we haven't caught up to our spiritually to use the type of technology. And I'm talking about stuff like facial recognition, digital currency, artificial intelligence, all these different things that we have developed can be used against us. And I think in the future, it may very well. Robotics. I watched MIT, two guys working on a robot, and the robot went crazy, started swinging at him. Yeah. And who's to say that artificial intelligence induced into a robot wouldn't do that? Who's to say that, like you say, a person who wants to be a global leader says, we're going to digital currency, and guess what? We're going to control your bank account. And if we don't like you, you don't take the mark or whatever it is, we shut you off from your own money. Yeah. How do I say it? They did it in Canada with the truckers' strike. Uh-huh. They shut them off from their own accounts.
Yeah. They did it in Russia.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so with these type of technology, yes, it's great. I hope AI will someday, diagnose people that they can live longer or cure them rather than treat them. I hope AI is used in a way that, and peaceful thing to make us grow crops better and do something about world hunger, but I don't see it. And I don't see anything that an extraterrestrial has done or anything to put us on the right path. They could care less.
No,
and
you're right about
that's my take on that.
You're right about that. Let me give you an example of how I use AI in my job. Is that a pastor uses AI? Yeah. I don't use it like some pastors are doing, and I'm frightened in my own, I don't want to say industry, but in my vocation, because I once asked ChatGPT, and this is when I was first playing around with it. I said, I need a 5-minute funeral. Here's the audience. Here's the denominational makeup. Give me a little sermonette. And it printed something out, and I read it, and I said, wow, this is really good. And so you've got some lazy pastors these days that's how they're doing their sermons. Way I've come to use it, and I use Grok now, is I'm sitting there working, and I've got a piece of software over here, and I've got like 29 translations of the Bible there. I've got 25 commentaries over in this window here. And I'll say, oh, shoot, where is that passage where Jeremiah says, and I'll just ask Grok that, and there it is. It's just right there. It says it's chapter 29, verse 18 or something like that. And so for really quick answers that you can verify instantly by saying, okay, thanks, and I go look it up. Yeah, it does say that. And so for that, it's really good. I'm embarking on a project here where I want to try to build my own computer, and it's helping me do that. It's like, hey, this is the kind of computer, as far as what I want it to do. What parts do you recommend? And it'll say, well, there's this one, and there's this one, and there's this one. So things like that, it can be very, very useful. But where this ties into, circling back now to Don's question about or rather, it was Chris's question about the pencil. Suppose you are an advanced technology, and we're going to get here probably in the next generation, where the generation coming up does not know how to read an analog clock, does not know how to read a map, does not even know how to write very well because everything's on a screen that they've typed in. There could be a point down our path of education.
Well, I got a story for you, Padre.
Okay,
boy, do I have a story.
Let me finish this. Where some future us walks into an antique store, and there they see a pencil. Say, wow, can you believe that there was a time in our history when we actually conducted everything we needed to do by this piece of lead inside this piece of wood, and you put it on paper and it made marks, and then it evolved with a rubber piece on the end that you could erase your marks. I mean, this is such a cool thing. I'm going to buy it. I'll pay 200 pounds or what it was for it. You can see why someone, in the future sense, whose culture has been there, might be really intrigued by something as simple as a pencil. An alien race that hasn't even had a pencil in 500 years would be very enamored with such a device. Anyway, your story, Don.
Well, right around the turn of the 21st century, around 2000 thereabout, on a chat on the internet, a guy popped up, called himself John Teeter or Titer. Is that?
It's ringing a bell.
Okay. What this guy claimed was that he was a time traveler that traveled back from about the year 2038. And the guy had and I don't remember all the ins and outs, but he had a tremendous take on technology and what have you. And over a period of time, he stayed completely anonymous. He did give his name as John Teeter or Titer, but he was sent back to purchase a piece of computer technology from IBM that stopped producing it around 1974-75 because there was some kind of like Y2K. What everybody was freaking out about, Y2K at the turn of the century, okay, which ended up being a big fat zero burger. But this glitch that they ran into in 2038, only this piece of technology. Now I'm going to have to go back and do some research on it. I wish I could remember what it was, but this was the only device that could correct this thing in 2038. And then the guy basically disappeared off the net. Now, this was a famous story. I believe even Art Bell did something on that on Coast to Coast way back in the day.
I remember hearing
this
Art talk
this
about it.
yeah, this was a very very weird story. Now, was the guy real? Who knows? But it's kind of like ghost stories around the old campfire. They can be fun sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, I tend to believe that guy now more than ever since the director of science and technology came out and said we can manipulate time and space.
You're dropping in and out of the matrix,
right there,
Chris.
really.
Chris,
Well,
you've been bouncing in and out of the matrix.
well, I probably have. I'll tell you, but I think that was a big piece of disclosure right there when somebody says, "Hey, we can manipulate time and space now, and distance has been annihilated."
Yeah.
So when you come out with that, kind of makes some of that stuff more believable. Remember, nobody believed Bob Lazar years ago. Years ago, they all thought he was a phony. And a lot of the stuff that he talked about 10, 20 years ago is all coming true.
30 years ago, pal.
Yeah.
Well, remember, though, John did predict we were going to have a global nuclear war in 2015.
Yeah. But here's how they got around that.
Of course, there's always a way.
There's always a way to get around that. And there was going to be a civil war here in the country. Okay? Which, of course, never happened, although some mornings I get up, I kind of expect it. But, okay, a different timeline because somebody did something. This is, by the way, how they explained the Terminator 2.
Right.
Something that historically shouldn't have been done was done, and suddenly you have another timeline. So maybe it happened in the other timeline.
Well, we talk about now interdimensional and ultradimensional. Scientists believe that there's other dimensions. The thing that I don't understand is what's the difference between an ultradimensional and an interdimensional? So, I mean, I got to look that up and find out what the exact definition
One's got a U, one's got an I, Chris. Other than that, they're the same.
Don, I think you make it so much simple for me. Thank you, because I won't understand it unless it's put into plain English. So,
again, returning to Mr. Titor, why would he disclose what he was doing?
Maybe he was bored.
Here, the classical version of him is that he was a American military member that was sent back to get this information, get these parts and pieces, and return.
Right.
Why tell anyone?
Why tell anyone?
Yeah. What's the game?
And of course, the other piece of it is to me you do this mission, do you come back? Do you have the ability to come back? You complete your mission, and now you return to a happier, simpler time.
Commander, if I may, can I ask you a question? Everybody has heard now about the science and technology director there. What is your take on what he said?
Okay, you got to tell me what he said, Chris, because there's got about like 2 or 3 million things I think I've heard.
Okay, he has came out in a hearing and says we have manipulated time and space. He also says that distance can be annihilated. What is your take on that?
Yes. How's that? My take is yes. My take is that maybe in a lab setting, you've done that. They just at CERN, I believe, did a bombardment of lead and turn it into gold, and they were able to capture some of it imagery on that. And I guess it's quite dramatic when it goes forward. So there are other experiments that have been done over the decades where they took very accurate time devices, had one on the Earth, put another one on airplanes that flew not at very high speeds, but they flew for long periods of time, and they could detect that the one that was on the aircraft did not, its time continuum changed in comparison to the one that was on the ground. Now I'm talking fractions of seconds, but the difference was there on two identical timepieces that are synced that this has happened. So when you're saying things like this, I think you can. I think there's also parts where you can say that if you have aircraft or spacecraft, just like what we have right now today, that can take off and land vertically and go at high speeds in between, you are disrupting the space-time continuum. The space-time continuum of known barriers that are going on. It's no different than saying that because we can fly supersonically, you are disrupted the space-time continuum from when our top speed was maybe 100, 150 miles per hour. So
see, now,
I think that there's just terms that are being thrown there that are, I guess, they're eye-catching and they're very attention grabbing, but it's not probed beyond that.
Yeah, and it could be something just superficial. It could be posturing. For instance, we manipulate time and space every day. If I'm late for a meeting, I have manipulated the timeline of everyone else in that meeting by pushing their schedules around. Manipulating space. If I jump into a crowded hot tub, you'd be amazed how much space I can create. So I mean, it's just
well, I mean, look what we do now with our handheld communication devices. We have conversations with people all over the globe. We don't have to wait until the next day. If we want to talk to somebody right now, we can talk to somebody right now, no matter what their local time is.
Mm-hmm. Let me just say this, that when this guy came out with that statement, and as soon as he said that, I equated it to the Tic Tac that you and I have talked about, Commander. Right. You made me a believer that that is our device, that is not an extraterrestrial. And looking back at what Fravor says and all of them, I mean, this thing knew exactly where to go, when to go to certain spots, and it just seems like, you know, that seems to be the direction that I think that this is all about.
So
Chris, let
me play along that line with you for just a couple seconds, because we're running out of time and I don't want to kill it. But let's say that to do the tic-tac, to fly the tic-tac, shortens the life of the occupants that are flying the tic-tac. Because we've created a force field that they're in so that they can survive all these incredible maneuvers, that we're not propelling it with combustible gases of any kind. We are playing in an area. But it takes so much energy to do this and the scale to do it, or it is so disruptive to the rest of the world. Because I think there's a pretty good chance that we no longer need to have petroleum and other.
Agree.
But we're never going to get it until we're down to our last drops of it. And then we'll move into that new capability, because that's how we operate. And this is the people that have created AI, and AI is going to guide us. This is the guy who comes from the future, impregnates his mother to birth himself, to repeat the cycle. The famous science fiction, how can a man be his own father? Well, there you go. He comes from the future. He meets his mother. She has him. He dies or goes back to the future. And this cycle just keeps repeating and repeating.
Well, on that note, we're going to end the show. Folks, this has been a great conversation. You know, we had the Padre, Commander Cobra, and Don Eckert, and myself. And we're going to take this up next week at UAP Crossfire. Please join in again as we always get into some interesting conversations for the entire group here. To the greatest, as Commander would say, the greatest audience on the planet, good night.